We're going to get started with Carrie Gunter Seymour, the founder and executive director of Women of Appalachia Project.
To unmute myself, sorry about that. I didn't really prepare anything specific to say. I didn't even really know if I'd be speaking. I was just excited to be here and meet with everyone. But I can very quickly tell you, those of you who do not know me, because I know at least a handful of the women here tonight have been part of the Women of Appalachia Project before. And this is a very exciting time because the Women of Appalachia Project is in its 12th season. But this is the first season that we've been able to partner with the Dairy Barn Arts Center. And it's very exciting because the Dairy Barn Arts Center are specialists at doing art exhibits. In the past, that's been a job that I took on. And I not only was doing the fine art, but the spoken word as well. And things got a little crazy, I can tell you. And so now, yay, as we move forward, the Dairy Barn will be handling all of the exhibitions for the fine art. And again, I can't say enough about just the wonderful feeling of knowing that they're at the helm of the fine art. That said, we do an anthology for our spoken word artists. And in that anthology, there is art as well. So there are two opportunities to be involved in art in the Women of Appalachia Project. And I can also tell those of you who are new to the project that this started, as I said, probably it's in its 12th season. So about 13 years ago, I decided that I was tired of being rejected for who I was and who my people were and the way I talked and the kind of art I like to do. And it was basically just because I was Appalachian, and it wasn't hip to be Appalachian 13 years ago. It's getting a little bit more hip to be so now. And I decided, well, I could do an art show. I'm a communications marketing person, so I can do an art show. I could do a poetry reading, and I did with the help of Ohio University and the Multicultural Center there. And 12 years later, here we are. And literally hundreds of women have participated throughout 13 states. And we keep growing and growing. We are a nonprofit, and we are trademarked. And so a lot of things have happened, and a lot of people have partnered with us to make that all happen. And I can't even tell you how excited I am to see all of your faces tonight. And I have not had a chance to get in and see the artwork in person, although I did watch the virtual version many, many times to see it. And I'm just so thrilled with the art. And Holly has been good enough to offer me some time to come in and look at the art, and I can hardly wait. But what I'm really excited about tonight is hearing all of you talk about your art and your experience, and maybe just a little bit about what it's like to be an Appalachian woman. Because for some of you, it's not that big a thing. It's not that huge a part of your life, but for some of us, it's a very, very huge part. And we're very proud to be Appalachian. And the mixture of all of that comes together, and we non-confrontationally say to people, see who we are, see what beautiful things we do. And we are not undergroomed, and we are not overfed, and we are not undereducated. We are marvelous, and look, this is what we do. So thank you all so much for doing this, for being part of it, and letting me still be a part of it. I'm just very excited to meet y'all tonight. So thank you.
Wow, thank you, Carrie. All right, we're going to get started with the first artist. Meredith?
Hi, now I got myself unmuted. That's a good idea. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, okay. Hi, and thanks for being here tonight. My name is Meredith Ickes Armstrong, and I'm a fiber artist who's delighted to be included in this show. My thanks go to the folks of the Women of Appalachia Project and the staff of the Dairy Barn, who braved, I take it, ice and snow tonight to get there to do this, for making this all possible. Thanks. I think, for me, I'd like to explain a bit about my work and how and my creative process so that you can better understand it. And Holly, I would have to ask are we going to go through the other pictures as, aha, okay. So the first one though, we could go, it doesn't matter. I make things out of fiber, mostly fabric, to explore what's on my mind and often address thoughts on the limits of time, the resilience of nature, everyday beauty, and personal substance. I usually start with an idea to explore or a story to tell, and I work intuitively, building as I go, enjoying the challenge of the unknown. The work starts fast with the great new idea and the excitement, and then the pace begins to slow and becomes more meditative. It's at this juncture that I feel the process becomes more of a collaborative work between me and the piece as it's evolving. We develop a relationship. I talk to it. I listen to it. And I try to go where I think it's pointing me. Needless to say, I'm often surprised and very pleased with where the piece ends up. Because fiber works so nicely with just about any media, it gives me lots of options, and I do like options, gets me into trouble. The pieces shown tonight have fiber as their main ingredient. The other media added to them are encaustic, textile paint, wood, and MX surface designed fabrics. So Wild, which is the first one, Holly, that we were looking at, is the one that's in the show. This one started as an encaustic monotype on paper. And I spend a lot of my time looking at my work and thinking, where is this going to go? And sometimes I get answers, and sometimes I don't. Finally, one day I was looking at the monotype and I decided, okay, no guts, no glory. So I got out the rotary cutter and cut it up into pieces, rearranged things about 1,000 different times. And then I started cutting, then I started rearranging until I got it to where I could see a creature maybe experiencing a dinner down there in the right-hand corner, maybe not. Other people see other things, and it's, what you make of it. But that one basically started with an encaustic monotype. The next one, which is Sail Away, a Thinkatorium, that began with a fascination. A friend of mine had created what he called his Thinkatorium. He ended up creating 5 before he died. And each one was for a different thing. One was for painting, one was for writing, one was for meditating. So I began to think, after he died, I wanted to do a tribute. And I thought, well, to honor Tom, I will make a Thinkatorium. And I thought, great, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it just like his rickety steps going up to this building that sat up on top of something that looked out over his farm. And it just didn't work, and it didn't work. And finally, I listened to myself and said, you're supposed to listen to what your work is telling you to do. And each time it was coming up with something that looked like a boat. And I kept thinking, what is this all about? And then I realized my special place would be a boat on the water with nice, calm noises or soothing things. So I went ahead with that to honor my Thinkatorium. Hesiod, which is the next piece. Yep. Hesiod started out with a drawing of the figure in a sketchbook. And then I decided to add it to a piece that was dyed with MX dyes. And I added, the figure kind of was really moving forward. And I made it out of my mother's, an old piece of suit fabric that she used to wear this suit a lot. And she was always moving, mother of 6, keep things on the move, whatever. But that was her attitude towards life, just keep right on going. But then I looked at the fabric and I noticed there's this big blue block over there, sort of blocking the way. And immediately took myself to my father-in-law's sheep farm, where he had monolithic rocks that he would often paint sayings on. And one of them was this one by Hesiod, that before the gates of excellence, the high gods have placed sweat. So I sort of see it as a conflict. I didn't realize that's where I was going at the time. A conflict between the let the good times roll attitude towards life versus the work, 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 and sweat a bit more theory that kind of was my father-in-law's way of looking at things. And they're both just fine. And I think when they try and come together, you get a lot of those fireworks. But I think we all have to become a bit more understanding of the others. So my last piece that I was going to share tonight is the MP Cure. I live in central Pennsylvania, where there are the low Appalachian mountains around me. And we used to live on a big farm right on the back of Little Mountain. And I really loved that. But we moved into town when our daughter became school age. And now when I seek quiet and woods, I go to a preserve near us, the Montour Preserve. And as soon as I enter those woods, I can feel my heartbeat just come down and calm me and just really make me feel so centered and whole again. So this one started with the figure, the sketch, or no, this one started after one of those walks in the woods. And when I got home, I was experimenting with a new toy I got of textile paint. And I was trying to see how to move it around on a canvas because I up until then I'd been working with MX dyes, and the textile paint is a different viscosity and it moves differently and it adheres differently. And so I was moving it around, and then I realized I was doing what I'd just been doing. I was communing with the trees. So anyway, that's where that one went. So most of my current work is changing a bit. It's still created improvisationally, but it seems to be looking more at the limits of time. Aging is a great thing, right? And it's becoming a bit more abstract. So I hope to be here again one day. This is a fun thing. I'm really honored to be a part of it. And I'd like again to thank you all for bringing this to fruition. And I hope that the next time we can see it in person. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen?
Hi, everyone. I am Karen Arzamendi. I live in Columbus, Mississippi, and I'm very grateful to be part of this exhibition. This was made after I finished grad school. I was a traditional quilter. I wanted to make art quilts. I was frustrated with my work. I didn't have an art background in my my undergraduate degree. And everything I tried to learn on my own about, I looked at painters and I looked at art quilters that I admired, and I still wasn't learning what I thought I needed to know. I went to school. I didn't do a thing with quilting after I graduated. And then, I mean, during school, I didn't do a thing with quilting. And then after I graduated, I felt like I was lost. I did installation for my graduate work, but I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't find the venues that I needed to hang things from the ceiling in my area. And I wanted to get back into quilting, and I was lost, and I just stumbled around a while. And one day I was thumbing through a magazine, and this image I thought flashed at me, and I went back to try to find it, and there was nothing in the magazine like what I thought I saw. And I said to myself, well, write it down, draw it out, what you think you saw. And so this is what it ended up. And it's quilted with various colors and various diameters of threads that reverberate out from those circles. And it was just pure joy to work with the color of the fabric and the color of the threads. And I am drawn to geometric shapes, mostly squares, rectangles. This is really the only art quilt I've made with circular shapes in it. Are some of the other ones there, Holly? There you go. I did discover the color field painters and abstract expressionists when I was in school. And on things like this, I almost see my quilting lines as brush strokes in the paint. I love color. It brings me a lot of joy. And this one I had just finished working on something with a lot of small pieces, and it was tedious, and I just wanted to work with something with bigger swaths of color. And I don't know, this one made itself. I think from the moment I had the idea for it until I put the last stitch in it, it was 6 weeks, which that's the quickest I've ever put anything together. And then the last one is, I call those log cabin blocks. They're very improvisational log cabins. When I first began traditional quilting years ago, a log cabin was the first thing I ever made. And I did only log cabins for years and years. And this is something that I just kind of gravitate toward naturally, to move color around with these improvisational log cabins. And I don't know, that's what I do. I work with color and shape, and I'm glad to be here with all of you.
Thank you, Karen. Margaret, Peggy.
Hi, I'm Peggy Black. I use Margaret professionally. I have lived in my same area for the last 47 years. I did not grow up where I live now. And I just found out last summer that I live in Appalachia. I had no idea. And when I asked some of the natives in the area, including my husband, if he knew he lived in Appalachia, and do they know they live in Appalachia, and no one knows. So I'm not sure what the stigma is in it. So I did some research, and whereas Appalachia was once considered and remote, perhaps backward, it was a poor area with a lower than average medium household income. It is today the same region of 13 states and 240 counties that is so rich in talent from a population that has a diverse background and unique lifestyles. Although many areas are still remote, as is my area. And I will do an aside here. I did not know I was talking tonight. I told Holly I would come, and somehow my name got put on the list that I was talking, and I did not send in any other work. So I do have a website where you can go visit it. It's peggyblackquilts.com. But my big aside is I just got high-speed internet. So this is the first Zoom call I've been able to participate with both video and audio, and I'm just so thrilled. I don't know what it's going to cost me a month. It might be my arms and my legs, but you know, I have high-speed video. So although many areas are still remote in Appalachia, the region is rich in tradition of arts and crafts. We're an area of self-starters, we're self-sufficient, we figure out how to create art from what we have on hand. It's an area where I'm so happy that the art and craft is still well alive and it's passed down through the generations. As for my work, the key to my success is that I'm engaged in my art every day, whether it's designing hands-on in the studio, or if I go to museums or study the great artists, the compositions of time. I just love it. So I have to do the work so that my art becomes me. My art is my voice. It is my vocabulary. So thank you for inviting me to show you Curb Appeal 26 as part of the Women of Appalachia project. And a huge thank you to the Dairy Barn. It's one of my favorite places to show quilts. They're just like the premier quilt exhibit in the country. Thanks. I told you it'd be short, Holly.
Lisa?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. I don't see me though. There I am. Yes. Okay. So actually, although not everyone is remote, I'm kind of super remote at the moment. I'm actually on top of a mountain in Western North Carolina, but I was born and raised in Southeastern Ohio, and I am a proud graduate of OSU and Ohio University. Thank you very much, dear. My husband is here. And so I'm a graduate of Ohio University, and I graduated in '79. And I think that might be a very familiar year for some people if you remember the Dairy Barn. That's when it was starting to get going. And I have dreamed my entire life of hanging there. So I'm really excited, you know, and honored that you've let me do this, especially among, you know, so many wonderful other artists that I really call artists, because I always am little, because I work in fiber. Those are tiny, tiny little pieces. They're 1/4-inch pieces of fabric. And yes, I cut them all up. I put fusible on the background, on the back. I make a pattern first. I take a photograph, I make a pattern, and then, you know, I'm a big time geek because, you know, I come from being a technical trainer most of my life. And from there, I use my computer a lot. I make my pattern, and then I go out and I get to go through all my fabric stashes, and I pick out fabric. I cut it in, I put fusible on the back of it, cut it into tiny little pieces, and then I use a wand iron and a pair of tweezers, and I place each one of those and hit them with an iron. And once I'm done with that, then I have to go back and stitch the whole thing. That can take, you know, 3 or 4 hours just in itself, just getting it done. But I absolutely love it. I've been doing it now for about 18 years. Little Artist is actually one of my little cousins that she and I, you know, share our love of art. And in fact, do you have the picture of the back? Maybe.
Sorry, no, I didn't see the picture.
Oh, that's okay. Well, the back of it, oh, that's all right. I'll talk about that one too. But on the back of the other one, it actually had some of her artwork when she was that age. She wants it to be known, because she may be listening right now. She wants it to be known that although those were not her best work, they were when she was that age, but now she's 7 and she does much better work. Oh yeah, that's where I am right now. That's my view. And yeah. So Layla, if you're out there, I told them that you do much better work now, but she is a budding artist in herself. So I told you how I put it together. And then if you look at the next one, this one, I've really started working recently in the black and whites. Usually I just would choose, you know, like all blues or all greens or something monochromatic, because it's easy, because it's valuation that makes the picture. I call these pictures life pictures when I'm trying to explain them, because just like life, sometimes we stand too close. And when you stand really close to these pictures, if you were really up there, you'd be able to see that they're so small and the little pieces, you know, all fit together, but you really don't see the picture until you take a step back, just like in life. And then you can get a look and see the big picture. This is Mr. Murphy. I just finished this a couple hours ago. That's me, by the way, because I'm on top of that mountain and I'm having a little hard time with, you know, high speed, our bandwidth, and being able to do both listen and send video. So it is like Chuck Close. Thank you very much. I meant to say that. It's a lot like Chuck Close. And in fact, he is a big influence into figuring out how to do that. Except where he went big and I went small. And one thing that I love about this is it mimics one of the oldest forms of art, which was mosaics that are still being, you know, unearthed today, and things that have been done several thousand years ago. And so I love that I've been able to take something so old and give it a new medium and still reproduce it. This is as I was saying earlier, this is Mr. Murphy. He's my friend Justine's father, who passed away a little over a year ago. And he was known for his smile and for his wild ties. And at his memorial service, all the men wore red ties and to honor him. And the tie that you see there is actually made up of his tie, Mr. Murphy's tie, who his son-in-law wore at the memorial. And then when I was talking to Justine, she trusted it with me to cut it up and put it into this. So I don't know what else to really say. If you had questions, I'll answer questions, but you know, it's just really fun. This one isn't stitched yet. I just finished putting in the little dots. Yep, that's my view. It is really pretty. It's dark right now, but it's raining, but not as bad as you're with the snow. I'm happy not to get the snow. I have many of my cousins who've been telling me about the snow, because I also live in Dublin, Ohio. So.
Well, thank you, Lisa.
Oh, thank you very much.
Nicole?
Hi, I'm Nicole Buchanan. Originally, I'm from Gloucester, Ohio. Right now, I'm living and working in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm still a student, so I'm still learning a lot of things. This is my first ever artist talk, and I actually didn't realize until this morning. I emailed Holly to see if I could still speak, and she said that I could, thankfully. But yeah, I'm in Columbus, Ohio right now, working on my BFA with majoring in fine arts with a concentration in metalsmithing and jewelry work at CCAD. Poppy Hollow was pretty much an experimental piece all around. It was experimental in form. Those pieces are all hollow formed sterling silver, and they're backed with a copper plate. Since it was my first piece, I didn't want to go all out with the silver. But yeah, and it was experimental in concept because I had just started kind of delving into flowers and the symbolism behind flowers, because I thought it was really interesting. I came across the fact that poppies are the flower of remembrance, and I thought that that was really beautiful, and the hollow forms kind of fit into the concept of memory too, because it's kind of like holding them within, and kind of like lockets that can't open. And when I was researching more about flower symbolism, I came across like its Victorian origins, and that actually kind of led to where I'm at now in my practice, because I came across memorial jewelry and mourning jewelry, and I just thought it was a really beautiful way to commemorate people and to commemorate events and really like celebrate the important events in life. And I thought that was really amazing. So originally Poppy Hollow was really meant as an aesthetic functional piece, just as experimentation, but ended up being a great jumping off point for my larger concept and body of work with memorial jewelry that's becoming my thesis gallery show, which is happening this April. It also really cemented my love for jewelry making and the potential that it has in art because of the relation to the body and dealing with such like close and personal subject matter, and then it's, you know, proximity to the body and being really held close, which is part of the reason why I love like pendants and necklaces and things like that, is because it's really like close to your heart and everything. So it's just kind of a nice metaphorical and literal connection. And I also think that this kind of is nice in this show because I've faced like dealing with folks in fine arts, there's always that issue, you know, where there's kind of like the line between fine art and craft. And I've dealt with kind of people going back and forth because I also do fiber work, I do painting, I do metal smithing, I do all kinds of multimedia things. But it's just nice having this in an all women's show with so many other craft folks. Like it's, I don't know, it's really beautiful and I'm really glad that I get to be a part of this. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. I have an Instagram and a website. I'll write it out in the chat, and I'm really glad that I get to be a part of this with everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole, and congrats on working on your BFA thesis. That's very exciting, and I know a stressful time, so be easy on yourself. Sounds like you have some great work underway, and I like that you mentioned craft. It is a very craft-heavy show, fine craft and fine art, and I think that's something special about the Dairy Barn historically, and definitely about this exhibit. Lacey?
Hi there, I'm Lacey. This is my third time showing with the Women of Appalachia project. I'm always super excited about this show. I have really strong roots in Appalachia. I was born in Portsmouth, Ohio, and I grew up in Waverly, Ohio. I've lived there my entire life, pretty much. And I went to Shawnee State, so, you know, I've been in Appalachia a while. My family is definitely a pretty traditional Appalachian family. And Holly, you can just like skim through these because I'm not going to talk about each one specifically. But my work is about family. I originally started working with these ideas probably about 15 years ago after my grandmother died. And it really started as a way to honor her and just kind of preserve her memory. But the longer I work with these themes and concepts, I kind of start to get deeper into memory and, you know, like identity through family. And most recently, I think I've been touching on family expectations and really just how to balance my own self with what I know is expected of me through family. That's about all I have. But if you want to flip through those real quick, and then I will mute myself.
Thank you, Lacey. Lily?
Hello. So I'm Lily Herb, as my name says right there. I'm in the MFA program at OU in the sculpture area. And the two pieces that I have in the show are both exploring different different ways of combining comfort and discomfort and thinking about boundaries and barriers, privilege and access, all kind of comes together. And sort of the way I was exploring that last semester when I made these pieces was through the use of soft sculpture and then hard objects. In this piece, it's steak knives, and in the other piece, it's barbed wire. And sort of playing around with these ideas of foreign creatures. And I'm really interested in science fiction as well. And yeah, I don't have a ton, I mean, I could talk about them forever, but I don't have a ton of like prepared things to say. I guess the last little thing is just that I think of these as sort of portals to alternate worlds, creatures that don't have our same, that aren't human, I guess, and thinking about how they interact with these things that we see as harmful or restrictive. And yeah, I mean, I grew up in Virginia, and you know, I'm here for grad school. I guess I have a complicated relationship to Appalachian identity, because I didn't really think of myself as that way, but as I've moved around the country and lived in different places, I realized how much that is part of my identity. And my one little anecdote is when I went to my undergraduate, whatever, I got my BFA in Massachusetts, and everyone told me it was pronounced Appalachia. And I was like, no, you're wrong. But, you know, they wouldn't listen until, hopefully they know now. But it's just funny how people think they're right all the time. Anyway, there's my spiel.
Lily. Allison Annette Eshelman.
Hi, I am Allison Annette Eshelman. Annette Eshelman is what most people call me. I currently live in Springfield, Ohio. However, I grew up in the foothills of Appalachia in South Point, Ohio, and my ancestors have owned the land there, my family, since 1826. So I'm pretty well entrenched in the Appalachian culture. And I earned my master's from Bowling Green State University with my concentration in fibers about 20 years ago. And at that time, well, before that, I began exploring fibers as an art medium in the early 90s, making art quilts. Most of my work now, though, explores three aspects of my life and how those aspects are interconnected and really interdependent. The aspects that I explore are my spiritual life, my family, and the love of the land that I grew up on. The piece that's on the screen on the edge of her seat is the piece that is in the exhibit. And that's just a really lighthearted piece celebrating my experience with dance when I was a kid, when I was in high school. Well, and many years. I finished when I was in high school, but and just the thought of waiting to be called out on stage, you know, was both nerve-wracking and just a huge adrenaline rush. So just a really lighthearted self-sculpture piece, and she's permanently affixed to that little wooden chair that's been collaged. And then Holly, if you would go to the next slide, this piece is where my exploration really began. I started exploring my spiritual life, my family, you know, my connection to the land during grad school. And I was looking at how I kind of fit into the church that I was a part of. And so each self-sculpture, each piece's self-sculpture body that's upholstered to wooden rockers. They're hand-dyed fabrics. And the rockers kind of act as a metaphor for my daily spiritual experience, like the back and forth of feeling connected, feeling disconnected. I use, in these pieces, I use the 4 colors of the church calendar to express the church, basically. And then there are specific texts that's silk screened on each piece. And then I also use the gears as like a metaphor for how I fit into the church and symbolizing my like interdependence there. I realize that, you know, my work is seen by lots of different people, and each person has their own interpretation of my work, and I think that's really wonderful. I am the curator of education at the Springfield Museum of Art here in Springfield, Ohio, and I teach our visitors that they should look at the work, or can look at the work that we have on exhibit there in their own way and make their own interpretations, and then that work becomes part of their own experience. And so I hope that's what happens when people view my work. I don't like have a set way that I want people to see my work. I just have something that I need to get out, I guess, of my own self. So that's what that previous piece meant to me. And then as I began to explore my place within the church, I began to consider my place within my family and how I'm interdependent on all those members of my family. So this little piece is a self-portrait at the age of 3. I'm sitting on my grandparents' back stoop. It's a thread painting where I've used the sewing machine as a drawing tool. And this image is taken from a slide that my grandfather took. And I've used many of his slides as subject matter to look at my family and my heritage and our connection and what that connection means to me. And exploring all those slides, have just been, I don't know, overwhelmed with the connection I have with each person. And then as I explored that, I also realized that I have a deep connection to Appalachia, and I live in the flatland now, but as I go home to visit, those foothills start rising on the horizon, you know, about Chillicothe, and I can feel the embrace of the land as I see it. So, and you can tell I miss my home place. And so this last slide is entitled Mapping Her Way, which is a collaged dress form. And I created this soon after we moved here to Springfield, as I began to like face my grief of never living on that land again. And it's a piece from a body of work I've entitled Women of Transformation. And so, I don't know, I'm just learning to map my way in a different way with my own family and my own children. And I have a different outlook spiritually in that. So, and I'm just honored to be a part of this Women of Appalachia project. I am just humbled, and I just thank you for the opportunity. That's all.
Well, thank you, Annette. Felicity.
Hello, my name is Felicity Gunn. I'm an artist living and working out of Athens, Ohio, as I finish my BFA in printmaking. The art that I'll be sharing tonight is from a body of work that I've been putting together for the past year as I prepare for my thesis show in April. This work is important to me for a number of reasons, and is pretty specific to the Appalachian region, site specific. it's a connection between domestic place and the land and environment within Athens through imagery and found organic material. The references of the sites that I've been collecting are either tied to my own living situations, and I find specific like compositional inspiration in regards to this overarching theme of man-made architecture paired with the regional landforms and plant life. And I've also been combining this imagery with handmade paper made from natural fibers found from the specific site of the image. So for example, this piece that's on display at the Dairy Barn right now, titled Home Again, it is an illustration of my current residence in Athens, and it is drawn on a handmade squash vine paper, and the squash I actually grew in the front bed of this house. So kind of pairing those two sites as a single piece. And then you can move to the next one. This piece is titled Fern, and it's an illustration that I completed like the end of last year. And it's kind of the first piece that started making me think about the landforms, looking at how buildings and houses kind of sit on the hills that are specific to the Appalachian region and in Athens. And I was really drawn to kind of the haphazardness of everything thrown together for out of kind of convenience, but also looking at little moments of like power lines kind of mirroring the treetops and plants growing out of pavement. So this piece kind of also just was like a jumping off point for me, kind of to start this like larger body. If you want to move to the next one. This piece is again a part of this work. It is an etching, this is titled Up the Hill. It's an etching on handmade daylily paper. So for this one, I sourced the material for the paper and then decided to go back and take references of the house that I collected the material from, that I was gifted the material from. And I really liked this composition because of the pairing of the rigidness of architecture and kind of the organic forms of the nature and plant life kind of growing around it. So that's some of the things that I was keeping in mind. And then just again, honing down on this line quality, looking at perspective and value and weight and kind of what that would do paired with this paper. So if you want to move, I think I have one more. This is my first etching that I completed. It's not tied to any specific paper, but again, it was just really fun to kind of learn the process and capture this college rental house. It's reflective of what I've kind of been going through as I've been going to school at OU, and just that the structure kind of with the juxtaposition of the organic plant life kind of growing up the sides of the house and the grass, and again the power lines are always like something that like draws me to a specific image. So yeah, I think that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for the Women of Appalachia project and for the Dairy Barn creating this space for us all to talk and share our work.
Thank you, Felicity. Casey?
All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Casey Jones. I am an interdisciplinary social artist. I use my creative practice as a means for civic duty. I use my platform to instigate dialogue around issues that are typically hard to talk about. My work reflects my voice and experiences around being a woman and mother in contemporary society. I have created bodies of work about breastfeeding, menstruation, miscarriage, and the realities of what it takes to be a working mother in the 21st century. The content of my work guides the medium, as the medium informs my message. In this specific body of work, even though I'm not working, I'm working, is intended to elevate and honor the role of the caregiver, the stay-at-home parent, or the working parent who also manages all the household work and their children. It is time-consuming work that we don't consider meaningful because our system is based in dollars. And in our economy, it's all about how things equate to money. Like baby shoes dipped in bronze to preserve a moment in time, I am attempting to preserve the efforts I have put forth in my job as a stay-at-home parent. These are symbolic trophies. And this work is especially pertinent now during a pandemic when over 2 million mothers have left the workforce in 2020 to assume the responsibilities of caring for their families. So these are the two pieces that I have in this show. I've also shared with Holly a couple other works of mine. This piece, Working Mother Suit, is a dress that I fabricated out of 250 breast milk bags. And then I staged photos of myself in a workplace environment. This body of work was intended to raise awareness about the harsh realities of what it takes to be a working mother, especially when caring for an infant. I've also created work about menstruation and the negative stigma that surrounds menstruation. These photos I did with my daughter. They are intended to not only honor this natural bodily function, but to also promote healthy dialogue that can happen not only between mother and child, but also within the education system and within our society. I've also created work about my experiences of being pregnant and giving birth. This piece is called Patriarch Confinement, the Business of Birth. And I am attempting to communicate that almost confined like experience that some women are forced into during their pregnancies. The ways that we are forced to give birth sometimes. This is my pregnancy with my second daughter, and I'm using the symbolic shape of the pyramid as a reference to the male kind of reference in our society. If you are interested in viewing more of my work, you can visit my website, which is caseyjonesart.com, or you can follow me on Instagram. So I'll go ahead and share my IG handle there. I'm also a professor, so in addition to my practice, I also teach at Hocking College and CCAD in Columbus. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you all listening.
Thanks, Casey. Marlene?
It is an honor for me being here today and having my work included in the Women of Appalachia exhibit. And my name is Marlene LeBay. I like to think my art is more than my paintings, but of how I choose to live my life and how I am moved to express the many emotions that often fill me to overflowing. Painting is one of the venues that I use to do that. The essence of my art is narrative, in that it tells a story, and for me is a visual journal of what is going on in my life at the time. Inspiration comes to me from my inner life and isn't always clear when I begin a painting. Just as in the world of dream and imagination, life isn't always clear. Inspiration for me may come from a dream, a flash picture in my mind, or pure emotion itself, which becomes so full that I need a receptacle to capture it. Since women are symbolically representative of emotion, they play a big role in all of my artwork. Thread is a recurring theme in much of my work, and Thread of Life is part of a series of COVID-related paintings that I began in 2020 as a way of processing the many emotions I was grappling with during the pandemic. And it wasn't until the painting was completed that I understood the story it was relating to me. The magic of it is that the story it tells can be different for everyone, and that, like thread, it is our stories that connect and hold us together. The next painting, The Foreboding, oh, I didn't know that one was going to be there. The Foreboding was painted in January of 2020. I had seen a photo of a woman's face whose emotion resonated to something similar within me, and I knew I had to paint her. I dressed her up in my mind's eye and placed her in a stark scene. I remember being somewhat disturbed by the painting after completing it. It felt nostalgic and like I was saying goodbye to a dear friend. I have found often that the first painting of each year is a good forecast of what the flavor of the year may be for me. And January began with the fires raging in Australia and a deep sense of foreboding with what was to come. At that time, I didn't know we would have a pandemic. The next painting, this is a woman of Appalachia. She's a friend that lives close by. This was the beginning of a portrait art that has continued for me. It was an exploration of working with people in the real. Like before, I was always working from my imagination, and this shows that I started to look at what was out there and started with this, and I explored palette and working with oils, and it's a little bit of a departure in style of what I usually do. And the exploration continues even now. With portraits continue a lot in my work now, as well as doing different things with digital tools and apps, and even live Zoom models. And you can see more of my work and what I'm doing in recent times on my Instagram at WaterSpider3. And thank you for taking the time to listen. And that's it.
Thank you, Marlene. Nicole?
Can you hear me, Holly?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, good. All right, awesome. Yeah, I love hearing about everyone's work. This opportunity is so amazing. So thank you for putting this together. And I love that I'm following up to everything that Marlene was saying, because the first thing that she had mentioned was that a lot of her work comes from these overflowing narratives and kind of create this visual journal of her life, which is similar to the way that I work as well. So I've been kind of capturing my time here as a student in the Appalachian area. And so this is actually a series that I created my sophomore year here at Ohio University, and kind of a follow-up to my freshman year. It can be exciting to come to college and move away for the first time, but it can also be very emotionally taxing. And you know, you're making all new friends and there's not really anything familiar. And for me specifically, I had gone through a breakup. I didn't know anyone at OU. And so from freshman year, I never wanted to be alone. I would always be with friends. I would go to counseling appointments. I would listen to videos on my phone and of people talking instead of listening to music. But then I went into my sophomore year and I lived in a single dorm. And it was actually the first time that I had ever lived alone in my life. And it was so tiny that you could touch both sides of the room just by lifting your arms up. And even though it was the first time I lived alone, everything had its place. I had all of these string lights up and I made it as homey and personable as I possibly could so that I would be happy to be alone. And it actually helped me become so much closer with myself again. And I'd pull all-nighters. I would make art projects on my desk in there. I would cry by myself, laugh at shows. And I just was trying to give this peek kind of inside of my personal space, since I was the only one that ever saw what I was doing, the same way that I like to share these personal narratives and stories with people. And I think that there might be 3 other images that I included. And the thing that Marlene was saying as well is that there's kind of like these little specific highlights throughout life that she can look back on. And there are just funny moments with these images, like when I cut my own bangs and like there's me straightening them in the mirror, and you can't even see the mirror on the back of my closet door because the room was so small. And there might be 2 other images left. I just highlighted some of my favorites, just me pulling all-nighters and drinking coffee and, making this space my own, and ended up growing more with myself as much as I possibly could. And it ended up being a great experience. I always look back fondly on the first year that I ever lived by myself and how much I grew in that time. And, I'm actually a printmaker at Ohio University, so this was definitely a different kind of project for me to take on. But I'm really glad that I went out of my comfort zone and did a photography series. And it was nice as well to try to capture the natural warmth that came from my room and all the different lights that I had hung up everywhere. Because I really don't know very much about editing. So I just tried to play with different photography like setups. So I would use different lights together. At one point I'd have one string of lights on and my TV light, or both of them off. I would just have like different sets and pairs working together to see what kind of lighting effects I could have. So some of them would create these really bright like orange glows, and some of them would be blue, and it ended up having a really nice variety of light throughout all of them. But yeah, that's mostly that piece. And I'm actually kind of continuing the theme of my personal growth in Athens and my kind of personal domestic spaces as I work on my thesis, which will be more print-based installation work at the end of this year. But thank you so much for having me. This is such a great opportunity, and everyone's work is so inspiring. The way that everyone is telling their personal stories is really wonderful to hear.
Hi, my name is Beth Nash, and I teach at Marietta College. I teach drawing and foundation courses, but I've been an artist, my whole life, and focused on painting for the past 10 years. But regular not digital painting, but acrylic painting. And when the pandemic came on, for some reason, I just didn't want to paint anymore. I just didn't want to. I had a whole show laid out and that I was going to send away, but then it was canceled, and I was just kind of done with it for a while. So I decided I wanted to learn how to paint on my iPad. And I had seen some work that I really liked. I like digital work that looks like a painting. And so this is done on my iPad with the app Procreate. And it was just a really interesting learning experience because I really am not a technical person. And most digital work that I was familiar with was very tight, and it looked digital, and I never liked that. So anyway, I was teaching online when the pandemic hit, obviously, because all the schools were closed. And I decided, well, I'll take a class online, which before I thought, who would do that? Never. Well, it was great. I did it. grade, and I learned a lot of things about Procreate that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. And so I delved deeply into online art experiences, drawing models, attending performances, and drawing on my screen. And I now do a lot of that, and I've just recently started to paint from my digital work. So it's been an interesting journey. And another thing is, I'm not a huge people person, but I love to look at people and watch people. And I realized when I was at home and working from home so much, I really missed people. So now my people are all virtual, and it's all very good. But it was a really interesting experience. And another thing, I think that I will repeat what Marlene said, I often find that I'll paint something which has nothing to do with anything really. And then I find out, well, I guess it did have something to tell me. And when I researched this, the influence to this today, this is based on a Susan Valadon painting, and the model, whose name is Emily Metalskin, she's a kind of famous model in the online community. She was recreating this scene from a Susan Valadon. And I have always been a person who looks at signs and things, and I realized that this was one of my first paintings that I did digitally that I felt was really taking me where I wanted to go. And I see her finding this card and discovering this under the couch, and I feel like that was kind of a prophetic statement to me, as that you discovered this new thing, which really opened my world in just so many ways. That's all I have to say. I don't have any more work, but you can follow my incredibly amount of posting that I do on Instagram at Beth Nash Art, and I will put that in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth. Deborah?
Hello, my name is Deborah Shaw, and I live in Coshocton, Ohio, which is in the foothills of Coshocton and of the Appalachian area. And I'd also like to say thank you to the women of the Appalachian Project and the Dairy Barn for this great opportunity. This quilt here I made, I bought myself a couching foot for my long arm quilter, and I was couching yarn and practicing, getting it ready to go. And I thought, I'm going to make scarves and make them look like they're blowing in the wind. And it was kind of in response to my battle that I had with breast cancer in 2016, because after that, after thinking about life and things in general that, I never thought about before, I thought, well, I'm going to do that. So I did it, but I didn't have the circles on it, and I didn't like it, and it sat around for a long time. And finally, I was rotating it, 90 degrees every once in a while. And then when it hit this angle, I saw the balloons floating away, So this is about my journey from my previous life, and which was, good. It was a good life, into being more mindful and spiritual. And that's what this quilt is. I'm trying to represent there. And it was a fun thing to make. And then this slide here. So in 2019, I decided I was going to make a quilt a day, because I've seen other people that do it, and I thought, I'm going to do that. So I started in, and the 2019 is on the right, and 2020 is on the left. And I really learned a lot, and I did a lot of things that I tested out doing other things. Like I did some stamping, and I did some couching, and I did some all kinds of different little things. I raw edge applique, and I truly have enjoyed doing this. So that's why I did it again in 2020, and why I'm doing it again in 2021. But you can see on there where I've practiced. If you look down in the real lower right corner where I was practicing my couching for, I was just practicing that to do my little scarves. And that's been really fun. And then this, I consider my therapy quilt, because this one came about it almost fell out, like that one gal before said it. I didn't know what to do. I was feeling sort of lost, you know, once the COVID started, and I don't know why, but for some reason you kind of lose your little artist touch there. But then this came along. I read an article on sewing curves. So I picked a range of values, you know, from white to black, and sewed a bunch of curves together. And I thought it looked like a landscape. So then I thought, well, there was a big flaw right in the middle of it. So I thought, well, I'm going to put a curve up and down or vertically. Well, then it looked like a tornado, and I'm thinking, yeah, I'm gonna chew up these coronaviruses. So those are little coronaviruses fighting around, and I call this my C-19 storm. And it's going to show us that in the end things we'll get through this and everything will be good. That's my theory. So and I guess that's about all I have. I'm so, again, glad that I can be here with all you and share this, and I've enjoyed all your guys' talks before. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah. Emily?
Hi guys, it always takes me a minute to remember how to unmute myself. Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
So this is a series called Old Money. And basically it came about after my dad died, and ironically the day before he died, he gave me this really serious talk about how he wanted me to go to our old house out in Athens County. Nobody had lived there in about 20 years. And he wanted me to go and just kind of salvage anything that might still be left, you know, like vinyl records. There were a couple old family portraits, you know, just kind of things like that. And so it was like really ironic because he ended up passing away the day after this conversation. And it's almost like he knew. So yeah, so in August, my sister and I went out there, and you know, it was very emotional for us to be there. I remember I got there, and my sister's going to be really annoyed at me for saying this, but we hadn't been there in so long, and we had kind of almost forgotten it was there in a way, if that makes any sense. And so I get there, and my sister hands me a beer. She's like, "You're going to need this." Just because I think, you know, it's where we grew up. And so it's always going to have a lot of meaning, both good and bad. So the photo that we are looking at here is called Elvis, because that is my Elvis clock on the door frame. The three photos, it was really funny when my sister and I came, because I didn't know that was still there. And I was like, of all the things that are different about this place, why is my clock still in the doorway? Also, the microwave was still plugged in, which is really funny. This photograph is of my first bike. It's my first two-wheel bike. And yeah, it was basically, even while we lived there, it leaned against the pump house for a really long time. And I just love the way that the weeds kind of grew around it, and it kind of was slowly like becoming part of the earth. And I included it here because also like it's of the space, but it's also of me because it's mine. And can we look at the next one? So this last one is actually of my bedroom. That's an old sign that I found in a field in Albany. And I honestly thought like cool people had road signs like on the walls of their houses. I was like, when my sister and I walked up there, I was just like, I was such a dork because like I didn't even like steal it. I just found it. So anyway, this was my bedroom, and yeah, and I included this one because it's also personal to me. But yeah, this is the kind of stuff that I normally like to take pictures of. This just happens to be extremely personal. And I feel like it kind of speaks to the whole idea of the Women of Appalachia project, because, you know, this house is like way out in the country, very rural. We needed 4-wheel drive in the winter, that kind of thing. And so, but it's also, I don't know, it's like, I called it old money because when my dad passed, my siblings and I inherited this house and all the land that it sits on. And so even though it's an old falling apart house that you can't even set foot in because it's dangerous, it still represents generational wealth, which is something that a lot of folks in Appalachia, you know, have less of, I should say. And, you know, it's also a stereotype. So I call it old money kind of ironically because, you know, it's talking about wealth, even wealth you don't necessarily want. So I'm super honored to be in this show with all of these amazing artists, and thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Emily. Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm from southeastern Ohio, born and raised in Marietta. I currently live in Columbus, Ohio, because I'm completing an artist in residency at Otterbein, which I graduated from back in May with a BFA in studio art and a focus in ceramics. I have the best timing and graduated with an art degree in a pandemic. So my work is created with a crude visual style in reference to my blue collar background of my Appalachian roots. Visually inspired by the simplicity of regional folk art and conceptually inspired by the storytelling of regional lore, I create narrative works that reflect the people and experiences I grew up with while living on the border of Ohio and West Virginia. Growing up as a product of a fifth-generation working class family, I find comfort in the physicality of clay and relief printmaking. They both demand the entire use of the body as well as the methodical patience in its building and printing processes. By going into the studio, getting messy, and working with my hands, I feel as though I carry on my family's tradition of a labor-intensive career. So this piece in particular, I created a recent body of work, both printmaking and ceramics, that focused on addressing the ever-present threat of pollution that the Mid-Ohio Valley faces. This piece, A Love Letter to Chemical Valley, takes the viewer through a visual narrative exploring this subject in particular, and each panel has a phrase. The first one is, he works at the plant 15 miles up the road. The second panel is, that year that grandpa fell into the vat of Teflon. The third, don't cough into your grandmother's hanky, you'll stain it. The fourth panel, how did everyone let this happen? And the fifth is, it's in our homes, our water, and our blood. The rivers back at home, they're like a source of life for the town. They are the source of drinking water. They provide tourist revenue. They provide jobs. The community really relies on events that take place on the river and the waterways, that bring in a lot of money for the town. And then again, it just provides the locals with recreational activities. But in our valley, there are so many chemical plants that are located on the water's edge of all these waterways. These plants provide the valley with jobs, which allow people to put food on their table, have a roof over their heads. So they're also a source of life for the town. Yet these facilities are responsible for releasing toxicants into the waterways, which are just polluting the source of life that they provide. So that's what this piece is about in particular. And then the next slide, I have some of my ceramic work. These pictures are pieces that go along with the prints in that body of work addressing the threat of pollution that the valley faces. They are depictions of the region's environment through a fantastical lens. By distorting the depictions of these animals and humans, I'm bringing attention to what may become bizarre and grotesque realities due to the pollution worsening both the water and the air quality of the region for several decades. So I just stumbled through all of that. I'm sorry, I'm nervous, but thanks for bearing with me. And I'm so honored to be showing alongside all these amazing artists. And I just have to thank everyone who made this show possible for happening. It just really meant a lot. it feels small because my senior show, I mean, in the grand scheme of all things, COVID has canceled. My senior show back in April was canceled, and to have like my work displayed in the show just really, it made up for it, and it meant a lot. So thank you, and I'm crying. Thank you to all my family and friends that are tuned into the Zoom chat. I see a lot of people here, so thank you, and I'll stop talking now.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That was very nice, and we're very happy to have you here too. So thank you. Mary Beth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Beth. I am a photographer and encaustic artist living in Dayton, Ohio, and I'm really honored to be part of this beautiful exhibition. I want to give you a little bit of my background simply because I think that so informs my work. I was born and raised in Southern Ohio on a little dirt road located on a place called Tick Ridge. So that sounds pretty Appalachian. The house I grew up in was and is, it's located to the Little Scioto River. It was surrounded by 7 acres of wooded hills and just smack dab right in the middle of a bunch of dairy farms. I'm the youngest child of my family, had 2 older brothers who were much older, and so I pretty much grew up as an only child. Because we lived so far out in the country, none of my friends' parents wanted to bring my friends over to my house to play with me. So consequently, I spent many, many hours just freely roaming and playing in the fields and the hills around the house. Nobody ever really checked on me or was worried about me. So I had free reign and would be gone for hours. And just this time of play was the root of my love for countryside and nature. And it informs and it's the impetus for my current work. And when I was 6, my dad gave me a camera. It was like a real grown-up camera, an Argus C3. And he had a dark room and he let me help him while he was developing photos. And that was kind of the beginning of my interest in photography. So after I graduated from high school, I went to Ohio University, got BFA there, met my husband there, and we moved to Dayton and raised a family. And after my kids were raised, I began volunteering a lot, and I got a job at the Dayton Art Institute in the education department. And there I developed workshops and tours and things like that. And one of the workshops that I developed that was really popular with the kids involved one that used melted paraffin. I'm sure there was some element of danger of being able to use something that was hot and smoky and waxy. And I guess I was just interested in caustic at that time as well. I just didn't know how to use the process or do it properly. So anyway, once I retired from there, I was at home, of course, and I just started looking more closely at nature and everything that surrounded me and took the time to look at things more carefully. And we're fortunate that our home is surrounded by really mature trees, and I looked at those a lot. I looked at the sunsets that I just never seemed to notice before, I guess because I was raising my family or working, and it's like, wow, this is great. Just nature really spoke to me so much that in the fall, well, where I'm from originally in Southern Ohio, we never raked our leaves or picked up things in the fall from the trees. But I just loved the fallen leaves, the sticks, and often gathered them and used them for my artwork. So when I did start creating my own artwork after working, I revisited the idea of the encaustic. I started dabbling in the process, and I used paraffin as my medium and crayons as a colorant, just like I did at the museum. My early work involved using leaves and materials from nature to embed on like canvas boards, and I would use the paraffin to cover them. Fortunately, I had a friend who was an encaustic artist who was kind enough to teach an encaustic workshop for a few friends and me. and I finally grew to understand the proper materials used for the process. I learned about refined beeswax, cradled encaustic board, and pan pastels. And I still loved photography, but I just was not interested in the process that you had to engage in a dark room. So I started using my iPhone for photos. I really enjoyed the immediacy of the iPhone, just the ability to capture a moment in time. I began taking images out my car window while passing farmland or other things that interested me. And I would take these images and print them and use the photographs as a substrate for my work. I would put these photos on the encaustic board and apply wax over the top of the photo. I would use brush strokes and tools to scrape into the wax to create detail. I would use pan pastels and a heat gun to enhance the images to highlight forms or shape or light. And I came to realize that the reason I create my artwork is just to bring attention to the beauty of nature, and such as the farmlands of Appalachia. And I feel that these resources are really fragile. They're quickly disappearing due to choices we make as humans. And my work is both a documentation of nature and farmlands and just a call to preserve them. And that's all I have to say. Again, thank you for letting me be part of this talk and this exhibition. It's beautiful, and I've really enjoyed listening to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Beth. I just realized I didn't flip through your other images, so I'm going to do so. Sorry.
Well, I'm the last one, so it's easy to forget. So these are just other images that I took, shots out my window of my car, and processed them and made